These last few days of the year are always a time that people take to kind of look back and take stock of what's happened in their lives and in their ministries and in their work and their families, to look forward to what God is going to do in the next year. Let's do that today with Passion Life. There's a lot that we can be thankful for, that God has been there to pull us through, to show His power and His might. Join us today as we review 2025 with Passion Life. Well, welcome, and we're very thankful that you have joined us one more time for this final Passion Life podcast of the year here with Mark Nicholson and John Ensor, president of Passion Life. How are you, John?
I'm very good, thank you.
Yeah, here we are right at the end of the year, last week of the year. Everybody's full of Christmas turkey and Christmas goose or Christmas whatever else they ate, and now we're looking at this last kind of sleepy, reflective year or week of the year, and I thought we would just do the same thing, just kind of reflect and be thankful and look back and look forward a little bit and talk with our people about what the Lord has done in the mission and the work of Passion Life this year.
That'd be great.
Why don't you start, John, by reminding everybody in like a really concise fashion, what's Passion Life, what is it we do, and so that we can set in context what it is we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, I think the first thing that people need to know is that Passion Life is grounded not just in Scripture, but in a particular data point, which is that only 3% of all abortion in the world on an annual basis takes place in the United States, which means that 97% of the moral crisis of abortion is really a world missions challenge. And beyond the biblical commission to go out and to rescue the innocent and to bring good news to the guilty, we're driven by this data point as just being good stewards to try to target countries where abortion, infanticide, and what we call gendercide is especially concentrated. Gendercide meaning the targeting of baby girls, for the most part in India and in China and other couple of other places around the world. And we've really kind of made that our main mission field, or our highest priority, go where the need is the greatest, and to see if God's people, including those watching with us today, can really join hands and promote the gospel of life in those countries, and to teach the church and mobilize them to start rescuing mothers and doing it in a way that brings good news to the families.
One of the things that I know that people so often articulate to me is something that they're very thankful for about Passion Life is not only is it a world missions movement, and not only is it a pro-life movement where we're going out and trying to save babies, but it really is at its core a gospel-centered, kingdom-driven ministry. We see a lot of people coming to Christ because the crisis of abortion opens people's hearts to think about things in an eternal way, or in a spiritual way, even if they're not spiritually minded people, if you will, or don't consider themselves to be. So the fact that we see a lot of people coming to Christ, I think, is just a natural byproduct of the fact that Passion Life has a biblically based approach, and the gospel is at the very, very heart of everything that we present and do.
Yeah, and it's no easy thing to do, really. I mean, if you study the history of missions, or even various ministries, they often start out that way, and within 10, 20, 30 years, they become really just a social effort. And we've really tried conscientiously to keep the life-saving work that we're doing connected to the life-transforming work that we're trying to do, and keep those two wedded together, because we believe that God has joined them together. But you think of the YMCA, for example.
That's what I was
started out as
thinking
a
of.
Christian urban
Sure.
ministry.
Right.
Lots of universities. Harvard started out as a Bible training institute for pastors. I mean, there's all kinds of institutes like that just lose their gospel foundation. So it takes effort and focus and concentration and intentionality to keep these two together.
It does. It does. So if you're praying for us here at Passion Life, that's one of the things that we would always ask you to pray for, is that we would stay focused on the main thing, and the main thing being uh, God's word, God's character, God's commands, God's precepts, and doing it, as God's work and God's way by the power of the Holy Spirit and not by our own effort, may it be.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So Passion Life was started, 12, 13 years ago, right around in that area now. And it started in one country, and now it's expanded out to over 40 countries that we've been in and are actively seeing kind of ongoing work. And I thought we would kind of talk a little bit about where the work of Passion Life and where this gospel mission has driven us this year, John. Kind of not necessarily a year in review, but maybe touch on some highlights of what has gone on. What is the first thing that pops into your mind as you think about 2025 and how thankful you are as you look back?
The first thing that pops into my mind is that one of our key leaders, Jeannie Pernia, has traveled herself to 9 different countries.
That's right.
And in Latin America. And then the Latin America team has gone to several other countries besides where they live. In other words, our leader in Cuba has actually gone to Mexico to do some work. And our leader in Colombia has gone to Cuba and to Argentina and several other places.
Including one of our staff members in Colombia who's been to Korea this year, which is really outside of the normal scope of what our Latin America team is usually doing. That was exciting.
Yeah. And that's exciting to me because, when we started Passion Life back in 2012, it was my wife and I going to China 4 times a year for about a month at a time. And now we've reached the point where we have second and third generations of leadership, not only doing the work in their own countries, but going out to other countries. And that's particularly satisfying because that really should be always our goal, is to be training other people to follow in our footsteps. It's disciple making, really.
It is.
So that's what the first highlight that comes to my mind is just how much in Latin America, particularly, we've seen tremendous breakthroughs.
I praise God for our Latin America team. They really, they work so hard. They love what they do.
It's very, very special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jeannie, not only has she been in 9 countries, but she's been to multiple countries multiple times. So it's been more than 9 trips that she's taken. And she has spent such a long time. And some of these things, she's gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, or going to 2 or 3 countries at a time before she comes home. She's in a really sweet area of life where she and her husband live on a piece of property with some family. So when she's gone, he's not alone, and he's not, feeling abandoned or left out. Right. He's just kind of living his life the way he lives his life normally. So it's a sweet time of life for her to be able to travel the way she's been able to travel.
And again, for people who may not know this, Jeannie's own background, again, is someone who 40 years ago ran an abortion business with her mother, experienced the trauma of abortion herself in her personal life, and then really came again to know the forgiveness and the cleansing power of the gospel. Again, this is why we don't ever separate the gospel from the pro-life work, because you got people like Jeannie who are workers today because they came to know Christ in part through the pain and anguish of abortion.
True.
And so she travels the world and shares her testimony and raises up this team all over the world. And it's a very anointed ministry for sure.
It's a great thing. One of the trips that Jeannie went on this year was India. She had never been to India before. She usually travels in Latin America. She is our coordinator for all of our Latin America operations, but she went with me to India because she's really good at working with women who have taken a step towards saying that they want to be part of the pro-life movement and want to serve the pro-life movement in counseling and opening a pregnancy office and helping other people who have experienced abortion also experience forgiveness and freedom and moving on in their spiritual walk after that, so Jeannie was able to do some of that with us in India. That was a great step forward for her.
Yeah, I think Mark, one of the highlights for me again is this picture of her standing outside one of the new pregnancy help ministries there in India, and then I don't remember if it's the same one or if it's a different one, but they call it the Nest. Remember that? Do you remember what Nest?
NEST stands for Neighborhood Empathy in Special Times. That's what they're calling it in English. In India, just outside of Kolkata, they opened a nest, which is a mother's home for people who need somewhere temporary to live while they're having a baby or considering their options. And at the same
Yeah.
time, as a part of the nest, they've opened a counseling office for people who are at risk of abortion. And Jeannie and I were there to be able to kind of
Okay.
cut the ribbon with them when they opened these two things up this year.
That's a highlight.
It's a
That's
highlight.
a highlight. I mean, in India, of all places, I mean, of all the things that we face, India has some of the greatest challenges. And so to me, that was just a beautiful highlight, a breakthrough moment on a small scale, not nationwide like we've seen in Cuba, but on a small scale. That's what victory looks like. Now we just need to multiply it 1,000 more times across India, and we'll have something going.
That pregnancy center is the first one that's ever opened in Eastern India that we know of. And we have a pretty good pulse on what's going on there. And it's the local people there who are saying, as far as they understand, this is the first Eastern Indian pregnancy help center that's been opened. So indeed, that was a big highlight.
That
I
is
didn't
a good
travel
one.
quite as much as Jeannie did this year. I traveled to 7 countries with Passion Life. My daughter was married in August in Wales, so I went to Wales and England and Scotland as part of that as well. So I've been
Yeah.
in a lot of countries, but I didn't take quite as many trips. Usually my trips are a little longer. I've been to Africa this year. It was really exciting to go to several countries in Africa with some African pastors just at the beginning of 2025. I was able to go to
And where did you
India.
go?
Yeah,
What were the countries that?
I was in Liberia, which is
Yeah.
in the if you will, kind of the southern western coast of the top portion of Africa, and I also was in Zimbabwe teaching with some African pastors from Kenya and from Uganda and from Liberia these pastors were traveling with me.
And there was one country that you were going to go to and it kind of got slammed shut, or what happened there?
That was Mozambique. That was
Oh,
supposed to be part of that trip. And literally within a couple of days of going to Mozambique, our access was denied, and the government contacted our host and said that we weren't allowed to come because of some civil unrest in Mozambique. And it was a disappointment, and there are disappointments along the way. When you
yeah.
go back and you do a year in review, it's good to include some of those disappointments in the year in review.
So that was one of them. What were some of the others that we had to kind of deal with?
Well, another highlight slash disappointment this year was the highlight being we got into Egypt for the first time. This was the first Muslim majority country that we've ever been able to work in. We've worked
Yeah.
in a lot of countries where Muslims are affected by the ministry of Passion Life, but never have we been somewhere where Muslim law and Muslim government and Muslim thought predominates the culture. So Egypt was the first place that we were able to do that. Really great turnout in Cairo. Very exciting, very passionate group of people that came in Cairo. But then I went over to Alexandria a few days later, and I think 4 people were there
Oh
when I
my.
started teaching. Now, a few more trickled in during the day, and I'm not trying to say that the right 4 people isn't worth it. The right 4 people is always worth it. But again, that's one of those kind of those setbacks or disappointments when you travel across the globe and 4 people show up to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
That's the reality of missions.
And that happens. I mean, it's not a rare thing, really. I mean,
True.
it happens 2 or 3 times a year, I
Sure
would
it does.
say, that we're going somewhere. We've been promised sometimes 50, 75, 100 key leaders, and then you've got 8 or 10 that will show up. And so you're fighting some internal disappointment, but you realize this is the groundwork, that has to have happen. You have to be willing to endure some of that and build those relationships, like you say, with those 4 people or with 10 or 12 people, because they are often the key to going back later on. And then you've got your 100 or 200 people.
Exactly, that's the case. And so we don't despise small beginnings, right, John? And from time to time, we see small beginnings, and it feels like a setback. It feels like a disappointment, but the Lord is in it.
Well, let me tell you another one, but it didn't happen this year. Back, when COVID was unfolding, we were getting ready to go to Guatemala.
I remember this.
And we had been promised a very large group of pastors that were going to be called from all over the country into Guatemala City for us to teach them our basic 4 questions, which answer the moral crisis of abortion with the gospel of life. And it all got shut down. And then nothing happened the next year. Nothing happened the year after that. But in 2025,
this year,
we finally got an invitation to return to Guatemala City. And here's an example where the results did not fall short, but they kind of far exceeded our expectations. So we get to Guatemala City and we find out that so many people have registered to come that they had to stop accepting registrations because the building code, fire codes only allow so many people in a building.
Yeah.
And I believe this particular church building could only have 800 people in it at one time. And so they had to stop accepting registrations at 800. And here's a picture of the crowd that I have. And then
it's amazing.
Here's another picture of the 4 questions that was translated into Spanish and formed into a nice little booklet that the pastors and the leaders used during the whole day. And then at the end of the day, the pastors all committed to training their fellow pastors, ones they have good relationships with in their own hometown. And then the expectation is that they would encourage those pastors to teach their people. And they use some averages, excuse me for that. And they ended up making a goal to try to train 1.3 million people in 2025 in Guatemala. Now, that is by far the biggest single outreach that we've had in the history of our mission.
Yep. Yeah. That started out as a disappointment. That started out as a 2020 disappointment that we weren't able to go over and teach 500 pastors. And then in 2025, the same group invited us to come back, and you guys were able to teach around 800 people and see that much. Yeah. So sometimes the Lord uses what is initially a disappointment, turns it into a great victory. That's the God we serve. Why don't we take a break now, John, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about on the structural side of Passion Life, how the Lord has grown the ministry this year, a couple few highlights that we want to run over, and looking forward a little bit into 2026. Does that sound good?
Very good.
Yeah.
The U.S. accounts for only 3% of the abortions that happen in our world each year, leaving 97% of the crisis before us as a world missions challenge. Would you join us in serving where the need is greatest? Passion Life, rescuing the most vulnerable where abortion is most concentrated.
We've received a really overwhelming and wonderful response to this tiny baby fetal model that we've developed here in Passion Life. This fetal model is a medically accurate representation from the 9th week after conception. If you go to our website, we've got a way for you to not only send those tiny babies around the world, but find out a way that you can have some of those tiny babies come to you for your own use as well. John, we have looked back a little bit at 2025 and kind of celebrated some of the things that the Lord has done in the work and in the ministry, especially on the field. There are a couple other highlights that I think we should touch on very quickly, one of which was the trip that you and I took to China late in the year. The Lord really gave us some unexpected gifts on that trip, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. We learned, number one, that over 2,000 babies have been rescued from abortion by some of the people that are, trained up in our 4 questions through their outreach. And there's probably a lot more we just don't know. These are the ones that they were able to track. And that was a real highlight.
Sure was.
And they're also starting to see, excuse me, that the whole idea of helping women in a pregnancy-related crisis is becoming acceptable much more widely within government and within institutions. And so what seemed like an uphill climb for many, many years is now turning out to be a wide open level ground for us to encourage the growth as much as possible.
That was a highlight, a real highlight for me as well to see. Amazing what the Lord did there. And will continue to do as we go into 2026, we're expecting. One last highlight that comes to mind was the fact that I went to Cuba early in the year, and we had a national retreat, if you will, for all of the leaders across the island of Cuba to come together in Havana for a couple of days for ongoing training and for celebration and for iron sharpening iron and for testimonies. And that was such an awe-inspiring event to see the number of people who are giving so much of their lives and their ministry efforts right now to the pro-life work in Cuba, resulting in, our seeing Cuba drop from number 1 in the world over the last several years down to number 4 in the world in 2025. That was one of the big highlights that we had this year. Now there are over 50 churches that have an organized pregnancy help ministry in their churches, and at least 22 or so pregnancy help centers that have been established out of that, John.
It really is something that I hope continues to unfold in 2026 as Cuba is small enough that you can change a whole country. It's small enough that you can really measure things and track things. And from 2016, when you first arrived in Cuba, to today, it's 9 years. We're going on our 10th year. Really, to see the transformation, it's one of those things that buckles your knees.
It is.
And it's one of those things that you dare not touch, like the ark, because it belongs to the Lord. It was his work that did it through his people. But it's just a thing that you just marvel at. And we just want to keep fanning it into flame and keeping it spreading across that whole island in 2026.
Praise God for our committed volunteers that are down there in Cuba. Keep praying for Cuba if you're watching us. Let's talk just very briefly, because I know that this doesn't interest people on its surface, but it is very important for the structure of Passion Life, is our staff and our board, and what the Lord has done by adding numbers and giving us great people. These are behind the scenes for a lot of the people who are watching this podcast, but it's really important.
Yeah, every organization has a business side to it. There's the mission side and there's the business side to it. And you need to run a ministry effectively as good stewards. You need good people. And we've added several people to our team this year. We've added 3 more members to our board. These are highly skilled people who bring us skills that you and I don't have and life experiences. And it just feels like we're growing as an organization. And we've gone basically over the last 3 or 4 years from being, a relatively small missions organization to having a budget of $1.5 million that we try to raise, mostly in small donors, churches that give, pregnancy centers that donate to us. But we try to raise this money in between all of our travel, and spend it overseas. We don't even have a central office because we want all this money to be able to go overseas. But these are some of the structural signs of growth in this past year that are also very, very encouraging.
They are. We picked up 2 new staff members. In
Yeah.
addition to the 3 board members, we filled 2 staff positions here in the United States. And we're looking in 2026 to expand our staff again by at least 1 person. I think maybe more than 1 by the end of 2026, but we're looking for a director of Asia initiatives. That's something that people can pray with us as we go into 2026, that we find the right executive hire for an Asia director. We're looking at the funding already falling into place for some of the big projects that we have going into 2026. So I'm excited about the year. I'm excited about the prospects.
Yeah. In India, for example, in 2025, we spent less than $15,000.
Right.
You can do a lot with a little in a place like India.
Yep.
Okay. But in 2026, we're trying to raise $250,000 just for the work in India, because they are the new number 1. And so, that's a huge, I haven't done the math to figure out how many times we're increasing just that budget. Okay. But you go from 15 to 250,000. That's a pretty big jump.
Yeah.
And it reflects a very new commitment to tackle India as the new number 1, where abortion and infanticide is especially concentrated.
Well, we're right here in the last couple of days of the year. We know that year-end giving, a lot of organizations raise as much as 25 or upwards % of their entire yearly budget just in the last couple of weeks of the year, as people consider what they'll do before the tax break of 2025 becomes 2026, the dividing line. Really, John, what word would you have for people who are considering what they might do at the end of the year, or how they might jump into 2026?
Here's my coffee cup, okay? My standard challenge is, if you love the Lord and you love life, is to find a ministry that you can be a part of and you can be dedicated to financially. And I always start with, would you be willing to give up a cup of coffee a day to fight the greatest moral crisis of our time? And that is the intentional killing of innocent babies all over the world. And so I encourage people to think about a $50 or a $75 monthly pledge, which comes out to about a cup of coffee a day, for you to register your commitment to do it God's way, to stand for life. And so think about taking my coffee cup challenge this year in 2026, and go to our website, passionlife.org, and just make a monthly pledge. I'll say, I will give up a cup of coffee a day, or the equivalent of that, and rescue mothers and babies from the violence and the agony of abortion in the coming year. And if you do that with us and you add your prayers, you're going to hear our stories, you're going to get feedback, and you're going to see God do some increasingly good work in the coming year. And I really want to thank you for weighing this invitation in your heart. Thank you.